Phew. Jack finally laid out a deep breath after he completed writing the script. He had never expected that writing a script would take him a very long time. It was already midnight. It was just now that Jack had completed writing the script. Well, had there been any other scriptwriter who had gotten a chance to hear what Jack was thinking, he would definitely spew a mouthful of blood. While they had to take 2 months or even more to be able to create a good script, Jack had just taken a few hours. And in the end, he was complaining about taking a lot of time to write the script. This was complete madness. Jack had definitely used the advantage that he had gotten from the system. With the professional script writing skills, in his mind, there were several scripts already. All that he had to do was to transfer it somewhere. And that was what had definitely consumed a lot of time for Jack. But it was only thanks to his professional combatant abilities that he had managed to type such a long script in a very short time. Had it been another person, even if they were given a script, they would have taken several days to complete writing it. At end of it all, a script wasn't just a storybook or something. Feeling somehow exhausted, Jack immediately took out the body strengthening solution. Although he couldn't be strengthened by that body strengthening solution anymore, it could at least help him in relieving the fatigue that he was suffering from. After taking the body strengthening solution, Jack felt a warm current running through his body. And in the next moment, he felt refreshed. It was as if he had never been typing for several hours continuously at all. After he was done, Jack decided to sleep early. After all, he was heading to the company the following day. As such, he will have to wake up early. Even though it was true that he was currently strong and could have easily stayed awake the whole night, he wasn't a person who was going to abandon his sleep just because he could. He did something like that because of necessity. A few hours while Jack was continuing to write the script, several well-known stars were making moves. Some of them who were on vacation had already booked their tickets back to the country or to the capital city. They had already received information that they would be needed soon. Since it wasn't known when that soon was, they had to come back to the company as soon as possible. Even those who had taken a leave, as long as they weren't dealing with anything important, they too were told to go back. After all, it was the big boss of the company who had instructed for that. And, since they were all being treated well in the company, although there were some who were somehow dissatisfied by being called back to the company, they were the minority. The Rose Entertainment Company was lively that evening. All those who were present in the city at that time had already gone to the company to report. And as such, the company had experienced one of the rare moments where most of their top stars were present in the company at once. What could be the reason as to why they would need us to come back this soon? Who knows? But this is something related to the big boss. Anyway, have you ever seen the big boss? I heard from one of my friends that he is young and handsome. Is that true? Do you perhaps think that I can have a chance? Get lost. How shameless of you to think that you can be able to catch his attention. It is definitely only a person of my caliber that can catch his eye. A pot calling a kettle black. What is the difference between the two of us? We are both B-class stars. You bums, stop arguing about something like that and focus on what brought you here. You were told to come over because there's something that the CEO wants to discuss with us. Hey, stop being so uptight. We can relax sometimes, you know? Ha! I was just enjoying myself out there. It was actually the time that I had just taken my leave and I was on my vacation. Now, my vacation has ended prematurely when it had just began. Why are you lamenting? You are always free. You can always go on a vacation when you are not working. Are you stupid or something? Do you think I enjoy not being given an opportunity to perform? I always stay around because I hope that I can be given a chance. Several discussions were going on inside the conference room of the Rose Entertainment Company. This wasn't where the higher-ups meeting was held, but where several stars were meeting with the top echelons of the company. I think you should take a look at. Ever since Jack took over control of the company, as well as the hiring of Alex, there had been several stars who had already been given scripts that they were going to act on. It was just that, some of them had yet to start, and that was the reason as to why they were currently present inside the conference room. Filming was something that required ample preparations. Otherwise, they might be forced to stop midway. Just as they were talking to each other, the door leading to the conference room suddenly opened. Patrick came in following a man who was wearing a black suit. The man's hair was cut short but was neat. He was wearing black shiny shoes and a white shirt inside his suit. Most of the stars present were familiar with Patrick. After all, he was the one who was mostly in charge of communicating with them in case there was anything that the company needed to inform them of. As for Alex, since he had just recently come in, there were many that had not yet met him in person, though they had already heard of him. Of course, they had already seen him on the screens during the time that the media was being informed that he had taken over the position of the CEO of the company. His stern face immediately made the rowdy conference room to be quiet. It was not only a matter of his current prestige, but due to the respect that these people had for him. Although they knew that the treatment that they were receiving was related to the new boss who had taken over the company, they also knew that it was Alex who was in charge of distributing the resources. And ever since he had taken over the position of the CEO of the company, most of the actors and other stars who had been idling around had been given a chance. Although it was true that some of them had not yet began the production, they had already been given the roles that they were going to play. After taking a seat in front of these stars, Alex didn't waste their time and began informing them about what Jack had told him. He gave them an example of the character that Jack had displayed by distributing the resources that were required easily, and as a result, Alex stated that he hoped and believed that the scripts that Jack was going to bring were of high quality. He told them to be prepared so that, whenever they were called upon, they would be ready to act. After that, since this was the first meeting that they were having, Alex decided to talk to them about a few more other issues. He asked them to raise their concerns so that they could be handled. Patrick, on the other hand, was taking short notes on what was being said there. In this way, he would be able to present to Alex these things so that he could take care of them later. The following day, Jack, who was accompanied by Celine, headed for the entertainment company. Since the two of them were the current shareholders of the company, Jack had decided to bring Celine along. Jack had decided on using the Rose Entertainment Company to begin distributing the scripts because he was planning on dismantling Calmond Entertainment Company by merging it into the Rose Entertainment Company. He had already discussed the matter with Jonathan because he was the only other shareholder of that particular company other than himself. Even though he was the one who had given Jonathan the 10% shares, he still had to notify Jonathan about what he was planning. He had decided that he was going to give Jonathan 5% shares of the newly merged entertainment company. In this way, although the percentage of the shares that he was holding would reduce, the same couldn't be said about the worth of the shares. When they arrived at the company, Jack and Celine immediately headed for the topmost floor of the building where the company was located. When they got there, they found that Alex was already waiting for them. In fact, he was just preparing himself to go down and receive them. "Boss, you're here." Alex went forward and greeted Jack. Immediately after that, he looked at Celine, not knowing how to address her. This was, after all, the first time that he was meeting her. "Alex, this is Celine, my fellow shareholder. Otherwise, you can as well refer to her as my wife-to-be." "Greetings, madam." Alex hurriedly stretched his hand as he greeted Celine. He had never expected that Jack was going to pay the company a visit with the other shareholder. Additionally, he had never expected that there was such a relationship between the two of them. Anyway, that didn't really matter to him. As long as the two of them were in good terms with him, he was willing to work for them wholeheartedly. "Let's get going. I have already brought the script that I had told you that I was bringing today," Jack stated. "Let's get going. I have already brought the script that I had told you that I was bringing today," Jack stated. "All right," Alex replied somehow expectantly. Although he wasn't sure that the script that Jack was bringing over was good, he decided to believe him anyway. He then led Jack and Celine to the office that was set aside for the chairman of the company. Before Jack took over the Rose Entertainment Company, there were already a few shareholders in the company. That bald guy, other than being the largest shareholder, he was also the chairperson of the company at that time. But then again, once Jack took over the position of the chairperson of the company, there were no any other shareholders other than he himself and Celine. As such, the office for the chairperson had been vacant during the past month. Even Jack had not come in here due to the fact that he didn't see the need to do so. The office was a lavish one. The decorations inside here were really eye-catching. It was obvious that the one who was in charge of renovating the room was a top-notch designer. And that baldy guy was also an extravagant person. After taking his seat, Jack didn't waste much time. He took out the flash disk that he was carrying in his pocket before he inserted it. After that, he began operating the computer, and before long, he managed to open the script that he had already uploaded into the flash disk. After that, he turned the monitor of the computer to face Alex before he spoke. "This is the script that I was talking about. I hope that you can get our chief scriptwriter to come over and take a look at it. In this way, they can at least verify that what has been brought over is not something that can be used to waste the resources." "Immediately, boss," Alex replied before he rushed out of the office to call over the scriptwriters. Although he had been expectant that the script that Jack would bring over would be of good quality, he had not dared to call over the scriptwriters. The reason behind this was that he was already used to that. In the company that he was working in previously, the boss there had always made things this way. As long as he brought over the script, nobody was allowed to inspect it. Instead, the production of that specific script had to start right away. Not long after, Alex came back with an old man that was wearing glasses. Although he was old, nothing about his posture showed something like that. This old man was the one who was in charge of almost 70% of the scripts that had ever been produced by the Rose Entertainment Company. Of course, just like any other entertainment company, some things were beyond his reach. That was the main reason as to why he only dealt with 70% of all the scripts. As for the rest, it was either due to the demands made by the higher-ups or due to the lack of seriousness in the department. "Welcome, boss." The old man gave Jack a slight bow as he greeted him. Although it wasn't that long ever since Jack took over the position of the chairperson of the company, the old man had seen several changes that came by. "There's no need to be so uptight." Jack waved his hand as he dismissed the old man's gesture. Although it was true that he valued respect, that didn't mean that he liked something so excessive. After chatting for a while, Jack came to know that the old man was known as Andrew. He was here in the company for over a decade and he was amongst the few higher UPS that had been retained by Denali after she did the shift in the management. After that, Andrew went through the script that Jack had brought over. As he continued reading the script, Andrew was getting impressed. He even forgot that he was currently in the chairperson's office and began commenting on the script. He was showing emotions that he had never shown in front of the other colleagues of his. He wasn't the only person who was reading the script, as even Celine was curious about it and so was Alex. As such, the duo also continued reading alongside Andrew. To them, this was really a good story. It was just that, there wasn't a single lead character. It was a fight between a kingdom and the alien race. Alex on the other hand had seen several scripts already, but he couldn't help but get impressed by the script that was presented by Jack. He could already tell that, as long as things went well, this was going to be a hit. "Boss, who is the one that wrote the script? I would like to meet that person to learn from them." Immediately after he had gone through the script the umpteenth time, Andrew looked at Jack as he questioned, his eyes shining with great expectation. He wasn't the only one, as even Celine and Alex were looking at Jack, curious about who it was that had created such a script. "I think you should take a look at, well, I wrote the script yesterday night after I completed the call with you." As he spoke, Jack looked at Alex. He was currently surprised by how enthusiastic these people were. Since he had gotten the professional scriptwriter skill, he had casually decided to write a script that could be brought over. In other words, this was not a masterpiece at all. But the way that it had been received was way more than he had expected. All the same, he was glad that the script was okay. After hearing Jack's words, silence reigned in the room for about a whole minute. None of the three could actually believe that Jack was the one that had written the script. Jack had been writing the script in an impromptu and didn't inform Celine about the matter. As a result, she was surprised to find out that he could also write script. In her mind, she couldn't help but wonder what he couldn't do. He was good at basketball, driving, even scriptwriting, not to mention the fact that he was good at business, although he leaves almost everything for Denali to handle. She couldn't help but feel proud that Jack was her man. And at the same time, she was determined to get herself even more useful to Jack. She didn't want to be a person that only depended on Jack for everything. As for Alex and Andrew, the two of them were slack-jawed. They had never thought that their boss was this skilled. Additionally, when Jack said that he was going to bring over some scripts to deal with the lack of quality scripts, Alex had never thought that Jack was the one that was going to write them. Andrew on the other hand was already beginning to doubt himself. He was already this old but couldn't actually compete with a youngster. It seemed that the old had to take retirement seriously. But still, he wasn't going to give up on his passion. This was something that he had loved ever since he was young. At the same time, he was wondering if what Jack had said about writing the script in a single night was true. But in the end, he dismissed it as one of the ways that Jack was using to brag in front of the beautiful lady in the room. He looked at Jack with shiny eyes as he asked, "Boss, can you take me in as your student?" Jack had never thought that Andrew was serious about being taken in as a student by the scriptwriter. But looking at the expression that was on his face at the moment, he was sure that as long as he nodded his head, this old man was going to jump in happiness. But still, he didn't like having such an old man calling him teacher. So, he shook his head in response. And upon seeing that Jack's reply was negative, Andrew was somehow crestfallen. I guess that I was getting ahead of myself. I'm currently too old and my potential has already been eroded by my age. Andrew shook his head as he sighed in dejection. Seeing how dramatic the old man had become, Jack took a pity on him and said, "Although you aren't going to be my student, I can set some of my time aside so that I can teach you a few things that I know about." Yes, immediately after he said that, the pitiful expression that was on Andrew's face immediately vanished as he punched his fist into the air. He was currently ecstatic that he forgot that Jack was still in front of him. For a moment, Jack could swear that he saw a mischievous glint flashing in Andrew's eyes. It turned out that this guy was simply trying to get him to agree teaching him all along. If possible, Jack would have been shameless enough to take his words back. But as the chairperson of the company, his words carried a lot of weight and he couldn't just speak freely. "I guess that I'll have to be careful when I'm here. This is an entertainment company where almost everyone is good at acting," Jack thought to himself internally. At the same time, he made a mental note to look out for the words and actions of this crafty old man. "Okay then. I hope that the preparations can be made as soon as possible so that the script can be dealt with. Once this one is completed, I'll bring another in case you have yet to find good scripts," Jack stated. Finally, both Alex and Andrew knew that there was a lot that they had to deal with. As a result, they agreed with Jack and were immediately dismissed from the office to go and handle their own issues. When only the two of them were left in the office, Celine sat on top of the desk as she gazed at Jack deeply. "It seems that you are good at keeping secrets," she stated after a moment of staring into each other's eyes. "It seems that you are good at keeping secrets," she stated after a moment of staring into each other's eyes. Jack was silent for a moment. Although it was true that he loved Celine, it was also true that he wasn't going to reveal everything to her. There were some of the things that had to be kept as a secret considering how they were. An example of this was the system. Even he himself currently didn't know the mysteries that lay behind the system. He wasn't sure that if Celine came to know about it, things would continue going well for him or not. Additionally, even the existence of the system itself was something unbelievable. And sometimes, it was always good not to reveal all your trump cards in front of even those that you trusted the most. After all, maybe Celine wouldn't want to reveal his secrets to his enemies, but who knew if his enemies had ways to get the information out of her? If there existed methods like sealing the memories of a person, who said that there couldn't be methods that could be used to extract memories? Just like a cliché line, "I am doing this to protect you," was the reason as to why Jack had managed to prevent himself from telling her about this. Of course, this was a self-forged reason. As for whether it was true or not, that remained unanswered. "Actually, I simply had an impulse to start writing a script yesterday night. I had thought that the entertainment companies weren't performing well enough. And, the shortcoming that they were currently experiencing was the lack of scripts, quality scripts. So, I decided to give it a try. Who knew that I was this skilled?" Jack blubbered. Celine squinted her eyes at Jack for a moment. She knew that whatever Jack had stated was not true. But since he was not telling her the truth, then she wasn't going to force him to do so. In her mind, she currently thought that, perhaps this was a skill that he had acquired during the years that they had been apart due to the sealing of their memories. And perhaps, during this period, the way that he acquired the skills of scriptwriting reminded him of something that he didn't want to remember. Or perhaps, he didn't want to describe it at the moment. As such, she decided that she was going to wait until the time that he was ready to tell her what happened. "Are we done here?" Celine questioned. For some reason, on this specific day, she had been quite impatient. In fact, she had been acting all mysterious ever since they left the villa. This was something that Jack had never seen her doing. All the same, he wasn't ready to invade her privacy by questioning about something that she didn't want to tell him about. "Not yet. I should be handling a few more other things as the chairperson here. After that, I think I will be done in about an hour." Jack thought for a moment before he replied. Celine heaved a sigh of relief when she heard that he was going to be done with what he was supposed to do here in an hour. It seemed that she was also racing against time. "Okay then. Just complete what needs to be done as fast as possible. After this, I need to take you somewhere," Celine stated mysteriously. Jack was perplexed for a moment, but in the end, he only shook his head as he agreed to her suggestion. In the end, he trusted her. Perhaps there was going to be a surprise. Jack and Celine stayed at the Rose Entertainment Company as they continued taking care of some of the things that could be handled by only them. Since it was true that the Rose and Calmond Entertainment Companies were going to be merged soon, They themselves were already starting to handle some of the things that would help speed up the procedure. Although the merging of the two companies was being handled by Denali, Jack thought that he might help as well. But of course, all of this was done during the last moment after he had completed making arrangements with Alex about the production of the mini-kingdom. According to Alex, if they used all the resources that they had, they could perhaps complete the production of the script in about 2 months. This was if quality was considered. Furthermore, this contained the production, marketing, advertisement and supply into the market of the already produced movie. This was the efficiency of the entertainment company. According to Alex's estimation, had the movie contained simple things, perhaps they could have completed it in less than a month. But all the same, Jack really didn't care about a month or two passing by. As long as the script that he had given was produced at a high quality, that was enough. When they got out of the company, Celine decided to drive. As for the stars who were eagerly waiting for Jack's arrival, they were going to be disappointed as Jack wasn't going to show himself in front of them. Of course, this was not part of his plan. But this was due to a certain jealous someone who was hurriedly snitching him away from there. As she drove the car, Jack looked around. He was wondering where Celine was taking him. As he looked at the streets, he found out that he was quite familiar. I think you should take a look at. In fact, he found that the area that they were heading towards was a place that he had been before. It was just that, he had not been visiting that place for a while now. The two of them came to stop nearby a lake. This was the very same lake that Jack and Celine had come to during the time that they had become serious about the relationship between them. He could already see that there were several boats that were floating on the lake. Just like before, he could see that at some certain corners, there were a few couples who were sneakily whispering to each other sweet words. His brows rose a little bit as he wondered what was the reason as to why she had brought him here. Unlike the last time, this time, Celine wasn't sneaking glances at the other couples that were around the lake. Instead, she looked at him with glittering eyes as she smiled mysteriously. Immediately afterward, she grabbed his hand and pulled him impatiently towards the lake. She seemed to be in a hurry, just like how she was back at the company. Jack didn't put in any efforts to resist. In fact, he wasn't surprised by how intimate she was with him. As such, he followed behind her as she led the way towards the area that they had picked a boat previously. Unexpectedly, unlike the last time that they had to pay before they took a boat, this time, it was as if she had already reserved a boat for this trip. Furthermore, although it wasn't nighttime yet, the scenery around the lake was still beautiful. After the two of them got into the boat, Celine began paddling the boat towards the center. Ever since she had taken the body-strengthening solution, she was stronger than any normal male. That was the reason as to why she had refused totally to let Jack do the paddling although he was a man. This time, she stated that this was special. The lake this time wasn't full like the previous time that they had come over. In fact, Jack suspected that this was due to the fact that it was still midday. Not long after, they arrived in front of Couples Paradise restaurant. This restaurant was well decorated, even more than it had previously been. In Jack's eyes, it was obvious that this was the work of someone, intending to make the place look cooler. Even then, he was still suspecting that this was still related to Celine. Not to mention the fact that she had brought him over, but she had also already booked a boat that was supposed to bring them to the center of the lake. But even so, he wasn't sure about what she was planning. At the same time, he was getting a certain nagging feeling that this might perhaps ruin his plans. But even so, he wasn't sure about what plans of his were going to be destroyed. When they got into the restaurant, he found that the restaurant was almost empty. In fact, other than the attendants of the hotel who were working as waiters, there were no other customers present. Even though it was true that this restaurant was always busy during the evenings, that didn't mean that during the day it was empty. But today was an exception. After the duo got out of the boat, they headed straight for the entrance of the restaurant. And the moment that the two of them reached the entrance, the restaurant's staff members immediately arrayed themselves in 2 lines. After that, they gave Jack and Celine a bow as they welcomed them into the restaurant. This was yet another thing that Jack saw that was different from the last visit. Even if it was true that there was a change, could it be perhaps that there was a change in ownership of the restaurant? Otherwise, how could there be such drastic changes that had occurred in such a short period of time, and without any notice? Still, Jack wasn't given time to deliberate about what was happening. Celine pulled him into the hotel. It was as if she found what had happened normal. This made him continue relating what was happening here to her. After that, the two of them headed for the very familiar room that they had picked during their last trip. When they got to the door of the private room, Celine moved to the side and pointed towards the door for Jack to enter first. Without any kind of hesitation, Jack pulled the doorknob and opened the door. The moment that he stepped his foot inside, he was forced to stop. Surprise! It was true that Jack had noticed that there were people inside the private room. But, he wasn't able to tell what they were doing inside there. But still, he was greatly surprised by what he saw inside the private room. This was completely out of his expectations, as this was something that he had forgotten about ever since his mother passed away. Inside this private room, there were some of the people that Jack had already made an acquaintance with, as well as those that he was already well familiar with. William and the troop from Incoat City was surprisingly present. And that was not all. There was his Aunt Anita and her husband Gregory, his cousin Jonathan, Caitlin and her husband, Wendy, and even Angie. But what had surprised Jack the most was the fact that Denali was also here. Before he headed for the entertainment company, she had requested to be free for the day and Jack had granted her the permission. He had initially thought that she was going to use the chance to go back to her own home. It had already been a while ever since she came over and had been working for him. Although she could communicate with her family, sometimes it was better if they could meet in person. But what was he seeing? She was here instead of being where he had expected her to be at. Still, Jack looked at the words that were written all over the private room in a daze. "Happy birthday to you, Jack." One of the writings said that. This was something that Jack had almost forgotten about, his birthday. Ever since his mother passed away, that was the time that Jack completely came to forget about this issue. To him, it didn't matter whether it was his birthday or not. At the end of the day, age was just a number to him at that time. Previously, although he wasn't liked back at the Alfonso mansion, he always held a small party with his mother to celebrate his birthday party. But, ever since she passed away, and having nobody that cared about Five Hat, he too threw that out of his mind as he was distressed about what he was going to do after he left the Alfonso family. Now, Jack was wondering how Celine had come to think of something like that. He himself had already been preparing to give her a surprise during her birthday. But in the end, she was the one that had beat him to it? What Jack didn't know was that, ever since Celine's memories were unsealed, she had finally gotten the information about Jack that she was missing. During the times that the two of them had been spending together when they were young, they had engaged in birthday parties of each other several times already. As a result, Celine already knew about the day that Jack's birthday was. So, she had began the preparations the following day after she had regained her memories. She had done her investigation and found all those that Jack had a good relationship with. After that, she invited them over so that they could celebrate the occasion alongside Jack. This was something that she had decided to do so that Jack would know that he wasn't alone. Although his mother was gone, that didn't mean that he was supposed to be cold to the others. He had to be cheerful. She didn't want to see him losing the cheerfulness that he had always been with during his childhood. That was something that Celine had greatly loved about that Jack who was young and carefree. To remind him of all of that, she had decided that she was going to invite all those that shared a good relationship with him. But of course, she didn't just invite anyone. She specifically chose those that Jack had interacted with before and they treated him well in return. That was the reason as to why George, William and the others from Incoat City were here. As for Jonathan and the others, those were the ones that Jack shared a deep relationship with. Celine came into the room with a smile blossoming on her face. She was happy to at least see the stunned expression on Jack's face. This was something rare to see. "What do you think about the surprise that we have organized for you?" she questioned as she held Jack's left hand and pulled him completely into the room. Jack was silent for a while. The surprise had thrown him back to the memories that he had about the time that he had been celebrating his birthday. Back then, although he and his mother were oppressed at the Alfonso mansion, at least, during that time, he could see that there was a genuine smile on his mother's face. "I think you should take a look at." Just thinking about that bright smile on his mother's face, Jack's mood was completely elevated. He looked at Celine gratefully and said, "Thank you so much for doing this." At the same time, he looked at all those that were present in the room and expressed his gratitude to them. Although it was true that some of them were here just because they had been invited, there was still a fact that they had come over since this was a matter that was related to him. This was something that Jack appreciated. He was always cold towards those that were against him, but was warm towards those that were with him. Since these people were here because they wanted to celebrate his 20th year with him, then Jack decided that, if there was a time that they needed his help, he would surely grant them without holding back. "There's no need for you to thank me. As your wife-to-be, this is something that I will always do even if I'm taken back in time." Celine was happy to see the genuine smile that was on Jack's face. If she remembered well, the first time that the two of them met with lost memories, his smiles had always been on the surface. Although it was true that he had somehow been trying to be genuine when it came to her, it was still visible to her that he was still restricted. But here, right now, the smile that was on Jack's face at that moment was the same smile as the one that he had always shown to her during the times that they were together back then. That's right, at this moment, the coldness that was covering Jack's heart had been completely melted due to the arrangements that Celine had made. Although it was true that his personality remained, the same couldn't be said about the way that he treated things. His enemies would always be treated harshly. But for his friends, the treatment that they were going to receive from Jack was definitely bound to improve a notch after today. The group then sat down. They still had to do some other things like cutting the cake and so on. But since the private room wasn't spacious, Celine had already made arrangements on what they were going to do next. She had already organized for the initial chatting to take place here, and when evening came, they would find another location. As such, the group chatted and laughed with each other. Those that didn't know each other and were meeting for the first time got to know each other. Apart from that, the group also indulged in limited eating and drinking, saving enough space in their bellies for later on. William and the others that came from Inchoate City approached Jack at that time and caught up with him. To say the least, they were still surprised about Jack's abilities and the way that he had handled the Dante family back in Inchoate City. Still, they were not going to let Jack go simply because he was more powerful than they had expected. In fact, they found that this was their chance of playing with someone of Jack's caliber without any retribution. Tisk tisk tisk. Jack, I can't believe that you actually managed to get Celine to be your girlfriend. William spoke in an exaggerated manner as he looked at Jack. What are you saying? Didn't you hear her saying that she is his wife-to-be? I just wonder what type of medication Jack fed her. Anderson chimed in with a smile on his face. But to say the truth, he too was surprised that Jack and Celine shared such a deep relationship. It's obviously his charm. What else? Just know that you guys are not as charming as him. So, there's no need for you to be jealous of him, Kelly stated calmly. To say the least, she was currently jealous of Celine. But still, there was nothing that she could do. She knew that she had no chance in front of Celine. Furthermore, it wasn't that she had fallen head over heels for Jack. It was just that, she was wondering where she would get a person as good as Jack. Hee, that's right. I'm the one that comes second after Jack. So, why don't you agree being mine instead of being secretly jealous? Benjamin, the burly guy in the group, chuckled as he suggested. Although he was burly, that didn't mean that he was brainless. In fact, he was smart to be able to easily detect that there was jealousy in Kelly's voice. Bah, even I'm not as shameless as you. I'm obviously more handsome than you. How can you claim that you are coming second? Ismail couldn't take it anymore and interjected. I'm wondering why you are fighting for the second position when the range from the first to the second position is unimaginable. William stated with squinted eyes. The others were silent for a while as they thought that what William had stated was true. But still, there had to be a person that took over the second position, right? The gap really didn't matter when it came to the numerical position. Even if there was a difference of sky and earth between the first person and the one that came after, that person would still be termed as the second. Why are you guys behaving like that? It's not like you have the abilities that Jack has. Even you can match his handsome face. So, NP, matter what you do, there is no way that you can compete against Jack, Kelly stated when she saw that the guys had gone silent. Whatever you say. In the end, I'm still the one that won over your heart even though I'm not Jack's match. Anderson chuckled as he stated. Do you perhaps want me to dump you right now? If that is the case, then try saying something along that line again. Kelly looked at Anderson as she said ferociously. Though, there was a slight blush that was on her face as she threatened Anderson. Hee. The other three boys laughed when they saw how silent Anderson had gone after the threat from Kelly. It seemed that the guy had completely fallen for the girl and wasn't willing to let her go. In fact, the relationship between the two of them didn't start long ago. It was just like a joke when it all began after the banquet that Celine had organized in Inchoate City. The two of them got together somehow, under the confused and suspicious friends of theirs. The reason that the two of them got together wasn't even visible in the first place. Although it was true that Kelly was a beauty on her own level, Anderson wasn't to be underestimated either. In fact, he was a hedonistic guy, though of a low proportion. Still, they couldn't understand how the two of them got together, and even the two families were not against it. It seemed that two of the big five families in the city were going to have a cooperation that would have been formed for marriage. Jack and Celine, who were seated next to each other at this moment, simply smiled as they saw that these five were bantering. Although their five families would always compete against each other, these five progenies of the five families were in good terms all throughout. Jack gazed at George, who was seated silently while observing the conversation. It didn't seem like he was going to join in anytime soon. To say the least, he was the most mature amongst the five. As such, he didn't think that it was going to give out a good impression of him in front of the adults if he engaged in the useless banter. All the same, the youths had definitely completely ignored the adults that were present in the room and chatted casually. As for the adults on the other hand, they too discussed with each other, albeit in low voices as they observed the juniors laughing around. They were trying to get to know each other better as they all shared some kind of relationship with Jack. Back to the group, William looked at Jonathan, who had been silent all this while before he questioned, "Jack, is this Jonathan your twin brother?" Upon hearing the question, all the others stopped making noise as they paid attention. Ever since they had seen Jonathan, they had been wondering about his identity. All the same, none of them had the courage to ask about the matter until William did. "Humph. How can I be a twin of this guy? I'm obviously older than him," Jonathan snorted. Is that so? But I thought that your birthday is still 1 month from now? How can you be older than me? You can only be my little brother," Jack on the other hand replied. Jonathan was rendered speechless as to how Jack came to know about his birthday. He had always been trying to keep this as a secret from him. But thinking about it, ever since Jack had informed him that he was about to merge two companies, Calmont and the Rose, he had to submit all his information as he was going to be a part of the shareholders in the newly formed company. Since there was nothing that he could say about it, he could only snort and turn his head to the side. As for the ones that were curious about the relationship between Jack and Jonathan, they were left speechless. Although it was true that they now had the information that Jack and Jonathan were not twins, then what were they? There was only 1 month difference between the two of them when it came to age. I think you should take a look at. So, how could it be possible for them to be brothers? But, if they were not brothers, what was the relationship between the two of them? Celine, Wendy and Angie had already gotten used to such a situation where Jack and Jonathan would argue about who was superior to the other. So, Celine spoke up to clear their doubts. Jack and Jonathan are not twins but cousins. It's just that their mothers are twins. Jack's mother is not here, but as you can see, Jonathan's mother is over there. As she spoke, she pointed towards Anita. In her eyes, there was a strange glint as she still couldn't get used to the fact that Anne was no longer there. The two of them had spent a lot of time together when she was young before her memories were sealed off, and after she came to see Anita, she was getting it difficult to adapt to the fact that the one in front of her was Anita and not Anne. "Oh, I see." The guys nodded, but there was still some doubt in them. Could it be that the twins were married by the same person? Or how else could it be that twin sisters that were married by different people have children that look the same? It is just that the genes of his women are getting stronger by the day. That's the reason why Jack and Jonathan took over the appearance of their mothers instead of their fathers. Wendy chuckled as she spoke. What she didn't know was the fact that, while the women in the room got proud about themselves, there were a few men that were sulking, especially so for Gregory. Wendy's words were no different from stating that his genes were weaker than Anita's. As a man, how could he accept that? But, how else was he going to refute that when the truth was there for everyone to see in the form of Jonathan? In the end, he could only shake his head in slight dejection. But at that time, he felt someone holding his hand below the table. It was Anita. She was looking at him lovingly. It was obvious what her meaning was. Even if you are weak, I still love you the way that you are. Gregory couldn't help but feel even more depressed. Something like that was supposed to make him happy. But how comes he wasn't feeling comforted at all? In fact, he felt that he had just been punched when he was down. The small party finally ended when evening was approaching. After that, Celine had already made arrangements on what they were going to do next. They left the restaurant and headed for another hotel that was booked by Celine. This was currently the best hotel that was present in the country at the moment, Royal Dish Premium Hotel. Even though it was true that they could have used the Glaze Hotel, Celine felt that they were going to compromise the business if they booked the whole hotel. This was something that she had learned from the time that she had spent with Jack. To him, it really didn't matter the amount of money that he was going to spend. But, they had to make sure that the income was continuous, no matter how small it was. Jack nodded his head in appreciation when he realized this. Thanks to the 100 times income multiplier system, every cent was the same as $10. So, if they had distracted the business of the headquarters on that specific day, wouldn't that have been a massive loss to him? Furthermore, since he was intending in making sure that his hotel became the best in the country, he might as well utilize this chance to get the information about the hotel that they were visiting at the moment. Inside the hotel, although they didn't take over all the floors due to the limited number of people, but at least, the number of people here this time was way higher than the one that was in the restaurant. Celine had organized with Denali and invited all those higher-ups that knew about Jack. This obviously included Tracy, Grace and others that had met with Jack previously. Celine and Denali knew that Jack was a low-profile person. But all the same, there was no way that they were going to have very few people taking over the entire hotel for the evening, right? So as to make sure that the banquet was going to be enjoyable, they had invited several people that would help them in filling the numbers. There were even others that were not part of the higher-ups, but simply because they were known to Jack, they were invited over. A good example would be Tim, the one that had been in charge of security at the Business Overload building. Since GVSL had been taken over by Jack, this guy had been given a promotion due to his efforts. Jack had never ignored all those that worked hard as long as he noticed them. Just like that, a small private banquet was held in the best hotel during the night. And although it was true that the hotel was getting a lot of money due to the booking, they were also losing customers to the Glaze Hotel and other hotels. This was something that Denali had decided to use. She was the one that had advised Celine to choose this hotel as it was currently their biggest competition. While the higher-ups of the hotel thought that they were getting easy money, in the long term, they were losing. After the banquet, not many things changed. Jack and the rest continued with what they were normally doing. George and the rest from Inchoate City and other parts of the country also headed their own ways so that they could take care of the duties that were on them. Back at Jack, he hadn't completely lost his attention on the entertainment companies. As the merging was being done rapidly with the help of Denali, Jack was getting closer to the target. At the same time, he had already began preparing a few more scripts. It was just that, unlike the last time that he prepared a movie script, he decided to prepare a TV series script. In this way, as the production went on, if the first season was completed, they could already release it to the market. And at the same time, they could start utilizing them so that they could begin fighting the other entertainment companies. His plan was to complete what had to be completed as fast as possible so that he could manage to get to see the benefits that came with the upgrade of his level of authority to the second level. Although this was something that was supposed to take a long period of time, to Jack, that was something that he had to hurry up with. Although he had previously thought that he had become stronger, he had come to find that there were even more mysteries that were hiding in the dark that could not be explained by science. A good example would be the one where his memories and Celine's were sealed. This was something that was obviously targeted. He couldn't understand how it was possible for the memories about a specific person or event could somehow be sealed. But that was not all. There was also a fact that his mother had the information about the sealing of his and Celine's memories about each other. But he still couldn't understand how his mother had managed to get his memories sealed. Additionally, what could be the reason as to why the memories had to be sealed? He couldn't believe something like, in order to not involve Celine in the mess, he had to forget about her. That was something that he really couldn't believe. After all, Anne was his mother at the end of the day. And since he wasn't involved in anything strange like the sealing of his memories after that time when he lost his memories, he thought that there had to be something fishy about all of this. What's more was that, Benjamin, who was supposedly his grandfather and Anne's father, could actually stand at the side and watch as she got killed by his own son, her brother. This was yet another thing that didn't make any sense to him. And Benjamin's words that, if Anne wanted to be free from the Alfonso family, then there would have been nobody that would have been able to stop her from leaving. From Jack's memories, as long as he remembered, his mother had gone over to Dalton due to the fact that she loved him. Even more, she was running away from the arranged marriage that had been planned by Nathan. According to what Jack thought when he saw his mother shedding her tears, was that she really loved Dalton and there was no way that she was going to let him go, especially after she had given birth to his son. All that aside, Jack had still had to focus on what was currently urgent. Although he had already dealt with a lot of people that would have caused him troubles, the same couldn't be said when business was involved. Since he was planning on exploiting the system so that he could complete the final condition from the system as soon as possible, then it would be better if he did that now. That was the exact reason as to why Jack had bought over several companies. This was him setting his sight on the first income reward that came with every first income that he earned from the new businesses. He had decided to exploit the system. Since the system really didn't care about how many businesses of the same type were bought over by him, then that was what he was doing right now. Although he had already integrated several companies, this was due to the fact that he was trying to reduce the burden that would fall onto him when it came to the management. Still, his current plan was that, after he receives the first income reward, he would merge the companies that were of the same industry. In this way, he would already be on his way to the monopolization of the markets. Of course, currently, Jack's targets were not small. The lessons that he had learned from the first income reward of the grocery stores that he had bought over were enough for him to change his mind. When he bought over the small grocery stores in Inchoate City, the reward that he had received back then was a motorbike. Although it looked cool and all, but that wasn't something that interested Jack at all. That was the reason as to why, to this specific date, the first income rewards that came from the newly acquired grocery stores were yet to be retrieved by him. He was simply bidding his time, like the free skill slots, to be able to acquire better rewards in the future. I think you should take a look at. Now, Jack was going to buy bigger institutions. If they were small, he would merge them before he earned the first income from them. This way, the first income reward would be at a higher level. Currently, what he was really looking forward to the most was the monthly report that was approaching. This was something that he had been preparing for a good while after he had managed to acquire a few more companies. While all of this was ongoing, Jack had no information that there was a danger that was approaching. At this moment, at the international airport of Azima, a person finally took a look at the surroundings. He took a deep breath as if he was trying to get used to the sudden changes in the environment. Finally, I'm here. I do wonder who it was that was involved with the hindering of the mission that had been organized by the Vice Supreme Leader. Even so, since I have taken action by myself, I'll have to make sure that everything is as it's supposed to be, the man thought to himself. He walked towards the area where there were several means of transportation. Since this was the first time that he had arrived here, he was obviously almost clueless about where he was supposed to go. But still, he had already gotten some clues about where he was supposed to start his investigations. That was, the last known location of Yona and Nathan. Their disappearance was mysterious and had to be solved as soon as possible. Taking into consideration that the competition back at the organization was getting fierce, and with a move from a person like him, it was obvious that there would be several people that would be alarmed. So, he had to make sure that he completed the mission as fast as possible. That's right. This was the guy that had been sent over from the stronghold to come over and look for Nathan's whereabouts. His name was Eric. He was strong and currently believed that, other than those that might have followed him from the strongholds, there was nobody that was capable of stopping him from doing whatever he wanted to do. I guess after I complete the mission, I'll start doing what interests me the most. Since this is the only chance that I have gotten to get out of the strongholds, I might as well use it to the limit. Eric thought to himself as he boarded a taxi. Since he didn't have a residence in Azima, he had no choice but to get into a hotel. But that was going to be a hotel that was located closer to the area where he was supposed to start his mission from. As soon as he left, a lady also looked in the direction that Eric had left in with narrowed eyes. At this moment, her mind was racing, wondering what was the reason that could have brought someone like Eric here. Good thing that I always kept my eyes on him. Otherwise, there would have been no way that I would have noticed that he was making such a move. The lady thought to herself as she got into a taxi. Where to, miss? The taxi driver questioned happily. He had just gotten a pretty customer after a very long break that he had due to the injuries that he had suffered. Follow that taxi. Make sure that you keep your distance. The lady, whose name was Samantha, stated with a cold voice. Okay. Although the taxi driver wasn't sure about the intention of the lady following someone, he decided that he was going to do it all the same. After all, the person that he was carrying was a lady, and since she was coming from the airport right now, he didn't believe that she was carrying anything dangerous. He thought that at most, the lady could be considered a stalker. As for whether she was stalking her lover, friend or enemy, that he didn't know was he wasn't sure about who was inside the taxi that he had been instructed to follow. At the same time, Samantha was just thinking, I wonder what the Panthers organization is thinking about to send Eric out of the stronghold. Aren't they afraid that they would be discovered? As long as they break the agreement that was issued to all the forces of the strongholds, the punishment that would come their way would be something that they can't handle. But still, if he makes a mistake and breaks the agreement, things will be better for me. Maybe I can help him break the agreement in case he is too careful, As she reached this point, Samantha's expression turned icy. It was unknown what kind of grudge was there between her and Eric. On the other hand, Jack didn't know about the presence of either Eric and Samantha. Even if he knew about it, there was nothing that he could do as they had already arrived in Azima country. Currently, Jack was doing some script writing. Since the end of the month was coming by, and he had planned to have all the two entertainment companies merged by the following month, he had to get over with some of the things as soon as possible. Currently, he had already managed to accumulate over 10 scripts that were supposedly for TV series. These were unusually long and would really take a long time to be fully produced. As he was deeply engaged in the script writing, he suddenly heard the sounds that were coming from downstairs. It was obvious that there were some people that had come over, and it wasn't a single person. He frowned a little. Although he had been expecting that Celine was going to come over, he didn't expect that there would be someone else that would be coming along. Still, there was nothing that he could do about it. He could only set aside the issue of writing the script so that he can deal with the normal routine that he had organized with Celine. The training that he had organized for her was still going on despite the fact that Celine had improved by much. To him, her managing to grasp the basics was not enough. Since there were so many things that were hiding, it would be better if she could become strong, ready to handle any type of danger that could come from the shadows at any moment. That was the reason as to why Jack had decided to start by buying a fighting club. Unlike the illegal underground fights, this was something that involved legal fights that were approved by the government. He had spent a good amount of money to be able to set up something like that, as not only did the prize money have to be there, but even the staff members like the referees and the judges had to be involved. Although it wasn't part of his grand plan, Jack was planning on using this method to exploit the system. He was trying to see if there was a possibility that he was going to gain something like the body-strengthening pill recipe. If it was possible, he might be able to get even stronger. Although he was currently strong, that didn't mean that he was invincible. If he faced the bullets and other hot weapons, he wasn't sure that he could survive. A good example would be the time that he had been shot by the bullet that was shot by Brandon. That time, although the bullet didn't penetrate that deeply into his muscles, that could not be the same in case it was aimed at his eyes. After getting out of the room, he headed downstairs. But the moment that he saw who it was that had come over, he couldn't help but blink. Other than Celine, there was yet another person that was familiar to Jack, yet at the same time unfamiliar. Olivia. She was the person that had come over with Celine. Although he had already met the lady 2 times, Jack had never bothered to try and investigate about her. According to him, although he had made her get stronger through the body-strengthening solution, that was something that he had merely decided on impulse due to the fact that she was injured by Celine. But still, although she was going to be stronger than normal, Jack knew that there was no way that she was going to get above him. Not only was he currently incomparable to her when it came to the matter of strength, but in the future, he was bound to get stronger. But it seemed that there had to be something with this lady. After all, the first time could be said that they had met by coincidence. The second time would have been due to her luck that Jack appeared to save her. But what about now? This was obviously her coming to look for him. After thinking about how she managed to find him, Jack could easily guess it. Since she knew the information about Nathan, then, it would have been easier for her to get the information about him with the relationship that he shared with Nathan. Although his information was currently discreet, that didn't mean that she was going to miss some of the basic information like the place where he lived with all the clues that she had on her. Upon seeing that Jack was coming downstairs, Celine spoke. "Jack, you have a guest here. I found her at the entrance of the residential area as she was trying to confirm where you were living." When Celine was coming over for her training session, she had found Olivia when she was still at the entrance, still trying to get into the residential area. Since Celine had seen her the last time, and she could still remember that the lady was the better apple of the two that had been there during that night, she decided to bring her over. Well, that was only due to the fact that Olivia had spotted her. Otherwise, she would have simply ignored her and went on with her plans. "I think you should take a look at." Jack raised his brows when he heard that. It seems that he would have to look into the background of this lady. After all, even when others were given the information that he was related to Nathan, they would definitely find it hard to find about his residence. With the fact that there were very few people in the Jezda family that knew about him, there was no doubt that she had to go through a lot to get information about his whereabouts. Jack looked at Olivia with raised brows. He was now wondering what would have brought the lady to look for him. Although he had a guess that it might be related to the request that she had made the last time that they met, he hoped that it wasn't. It was already a favor that he had done her by granting her the body-strengthening solution. So, he hoped that she would be content with that. Let's take a seat. Since she was a guest this time, he decided to at least be polite enough to welcome her to have a seat rather than chasing her away right then. Celine was quite curious about what Olivia was here for, and as such, she decided that she was going to listen on the conversation. Jack didn't mind and neither did Olivia mind. In her opinion, what she wanted to talk to Jack about was something that wasn't supposed to be much of a secret when facing Celine. After they had settled in the living room of the villa, Jack looked at Olivia as he waited for her to speak. Ahem. I'm sorry to intrude upon you, but I'm serious about what I said last time. Can you give me a chance? Olivia cleared her throat as she asked. Her eyes were filled with determination as she looked at Jack. At this moment, her heart was already racing, wondering if there was a chance that Jack was going to accept her request. At the same time, she had also planned of a way that she was going to use to convince Jack to accept. She absolutely wasn't willing to be refused this time. At this moment, Celine's expression turned a little weird as she looked at Olivia. Then, she looked at Jack as she was wondering what was going on as she had just jumped in the middle of the negotiation. No, Jack was resolute with his answer. There was no way that he was going to agree to that considering that he already had a busy schedule. I know that you are a busy person, but can you please help me out here? Currently, I'm sure that there is nothing that I can offer that you don't have. But still, I hope that you can accept the little that I have as well as my request. Olivia tried again. She was a smart person. Although she was a fan of fighting, that didn't make her an idiot. So, for the last few days, she had been doing her own research about Jack and had managed to find several things by finding nothing. Since there was a lot of information about Jack that was hidden, it was obvious that he wasn't a simple person. Additionally, with the fact that Jack could stay at a place like Serenity Residential Area, that meant that he wasn't poor as well. As for the honey trap that she didn't even think about, what was the use of that when Jack had a beautiful girlfriend that was not only strong, but she also deeply cared about him? That was something that was bound to be impossible. Celine, who was listening from the side, looked at Olivia strangely. She was wondering what was going on. Jack just so happened to see her expression and immediately knew what was running in the mind of that girl. He looked at Olivia and couldn't help but grumble, "Why don't you be a little straightforward? You are now making my wife-to-be to think that you are actually trying to be my woman?" There was silence in the room for a moment. Olivia was struck speechless at that moment while Celine was blushing slightly at how direct Jack was. She was now wondering if Jack had the ability to read her mind. Olivia blinked her eyes several times. She was wondering if she had heard what Jack had said correctly. So, she couldn't help but ask, "Are you trying to say that, for you to help me, I'll have to be your woman?" Jack was now beginning to doubt the intelligence of the lady that was before him. Even if there was supposed to be a misunderstanding, why can't simply read the atmosphere? To say the least, Jack had never thought along the lines that Olivia had spoken about. He was already content with being with Celine and had the intentions of pushing the relationship further. Olivia seemed to have noticed that there was a sudden shift in the atmosphere after her words. As she looked at the expressions of the two as they looked at her with judgmental eyes, her mind began working rapidly and she managed to grasp the reason for that. "Ah, I'm wrong about that." Olivia tried to confirm. What she had just said was something that she did out of impulse. That was what she had thought the moment that Jack talked about being straightforward. It wasn't like she had never experienced a situation where she was asked to trade her body for the benefits that she wanted. This was also the main reason as to why she had joined the police force when she grew up. Although she was training in fighting skills ever since she was young, that was only because she was being forced by her father. When she came to encounter such a situation, she was just in high school. That was the time that she had become motivated to practice so that she could become stronger. So, when Jack talked about being straightforward, that was the first thought that came into her mind and that was just what she spoke. But now that she thought about how Jack seemed to care about Celine, there was a very small possibility that he would want to get another woman, mostly when he was in the presence of Celine. "Come on. What kind of impression have I given to you so that you have such a kind of image about me in your mind?" Jack couldn't help but explain when he saw her asking. But upon seeing that there was both an innocent and sorry expression on her face, Jack decided to give her a leeway. He sighed and said, "It really doesn't matter what kind of benefits that you'll try offering. But the answer still remains the same as before, no." Ahem. What topic are you guys talking about? Feeling that she was being left out, Celine couldn't help but want to know what this agreement that they were talking about was. "Actually, ever since the first day that I met you guys, I was impressed by the fighting skills that you possess. That is the reason as to why I have been looking for Mr. Jack to see if he could take me under his tutelage when it comes to combat skills. Olivia took the initiative to explain. Still, there was something that she had left out. That was the fact that she had managed to meet Jack once again and he had saved her. She wasn't sure if Celine knew about his identity of being a soldier. And since most of his information had been kept in the dark, she decided not to expose them. That was the reason as to why she hadn't thanked Jack well even though he had saved her back then. She wanted to talk about something like that in private. Furthermore, what really happened on that day was something that had to be kept as a secret. There was no way that she was going to disclose it considering that the information may reach the higher-ups of the police force. She had given them false information about the incidents, and if they came to know that she had lied, then, even her father would not be able to help her to get out of the problems that she would have landed in. Celine thought about what Olivia said and found that this was indeed reasonable. From her view, although Olivia was a lady, she had actually taken the duty of being on patrol at nights to deal with the gangsters that were always causing trouble in the city. That heroic appearance was something that Celine had managed to see in only a few women, herself excluded. And now, apart from the fact that Jack had given her the body-strengthening solution, the lady had also not talked about the fact that they were the ones that were involved in the murder of her previous partner. Currently, Celine was thinking about the crucial thing here. The body-strengthening solution was something that was offered by Jack only to those that were part of the special security team or the topmost management staff that had acquired his trust. And to her, Olivia was no different from a stranger. In other words, she didn't trust that Olivia would always keep the secret about the body-strengthening solution. She had previously talked to Jack about the matter, but he had told her not to worry. But there was no way that her little heart could take on the pressure that the secret might be exposed, and Jack might have to face several people with dark intentions. Although she knew that Jack was strong, there was no way that she was going to ask him to continuously engage in battles. I think you should take a look at, why don't you allow her to join the training schedule that you planned for me? I can at least get some company when I'm training, Celine suggested. Jack looked at her for a while, thinking about what she was aiming at. Perhaps managing to see through her worries, he nodded. He then looked at Olivia and said, I'll send you the training schedule after you leave me the contact information. You're free to start at your convenience. Jack could already tell that Celine was worried about monitoring Olivia. That was the reason that he had decided to accept. Perhaps he too might try using this chance to get to know a little more information about this lucky lady. When Olivia saw that Jack had actually accepted, she was greatly surprised. But at the same time, she was obviously happy about it. Still, she couldn't help but think about how Celine was different from other ladies. They would have definitely chased away any kind of woman that would attempt approaching their men. But on the other hand, Celine was actually asking for a chance so that she could get closer to Jack. She didn't understand that at all. All the same, she threw those thoughts out of her mind as she decisively focused on the present. Thank you for giving me this chance, sir and madam. I promise that I won't disappoint you. Olivia got to her feet as she stated excitedly. This was a chance that she had been yearning for in a while now. There's no need for you to be so polite about that. Jack casually waved his hand as he dismissed her. Then, he thought of something and asked, when are you going to start the training? Olivia sat back on the seat before she responded, I can start right now if that's possible. Jack was slightly stunned by her almost instantaneous answer. He had never thought that the lady would be this decisive when it came to the combat training. Aren't you a police officer? Are you sure that the training won't be affecting your work schedule? He couldn't help but ask. Not at all. Currently, I have been suspended from duty indefinitely. I'm not sure when I'll be back on duty, but I'm sure that it won't be anytime soon, Olivia casually replied. Due to the fact that there were two incidences that involved the deaths of police officers, this matter had caused an alarm to erupt within the police ranks. Since she was the center of it all, where her partner died and all the others that were alongside her got killed off, and she was the only survivor, doubts had already been risen about her. Some people even thought that she was cooperating with the dark gangs in the city. But due to how she had always been cleanly performing her duties as a police officer rather than detaining her when they continued with the investigation, they decided to suspend her from her duties. That was the only thing that could be done due to the fact that there was no evidence that had been found that indicated that she had switched sides. Furthermore, there was still the fact that her father was also a big shot in the police force in the city. That was the reason as to why they gave her a leeway. Previously, Olivia was not in a good mood due to that fact, but now that Jack had agreed to train her, then she was more than happy about the suspension that she received. After all, She now had a lot of free time that she could utilize to train under Jack. Furthermore, she took this as compensation from Jack. After all, during all these incidences, Jack was still involved in one way or the other. So, although she didn't talk about what she wanted to offer to Jack for him to agree to teaching her, she didn't feel the slightest guilty. Jack and Celine were surprised by the fact that she was suspended. But after they thought about the matter, they thought that this was a somehow lighter punishment that she had received after all the incidences. After that was out of the way, the three of them engaged in casual chats as they tried to get to know each other. But after about 20 minutes, Jack's phone rang. When he looked at the contact information, he found that the person that was calling him was Valnaro. Jack frowned as he wondered what the reason for the call could be. He had always made sure to fulfill his part of the deal about the body strengthening solution. As for the missions, that was something that he had yet to consider since he himself was busy at the moment. After a moment of pause, Jack still received the call. Yes? He asked the moment that he received the call. A few hours before, at the military base that was located in the central province of Azima, there was a lot of tension. The soldiers in the camp were quite restless as they moved around. Several commands were being issued by those that held high positions. None of the soldiers was idle at all. Weapons were being moved from the armory and so on. In other words, the camp looked no different from one that was preparing to face a great enemy that they had ever before. Inside the conference room in the garrison, several soldiers that held the highest positions in the central region were gathered around a rectangular table. There was a total of 6 people with 5 seating at the side of the table and the last one occupying the head of the table. All of these were the 6 supreme leaders of the garrison that was situated in the central province. The 5 were majors that led their respective companies, and finally, there was the colonel who was their head. Amongst the present majors, there was a face that Jack would be familiar with. It was Major Alonso. This old man was seated here, not showing any airs, as those that were present here were all of the same rank as him or his superior. These were all those that were in charge of the companies that were situated in the area close to Kartu City. There was a total of 14 companies, each major leading 4 companies combined. But, the first and second companies were an exception as they were special. Not only were these companies the largest amongst the 14 companies, but they also contained the most capable soldiers. The majors that were leading these companies were always the most skilled amongst the majors. Of the current 5, 3 of them were in charge of the last 12 companies, each one of them leading 4. The last 2 each held a single company, but their positions were better than the others that headed 4 companies. Currently, the expressions of all those that were present were all solemn. None of them was in a good mood, and their faces indicated that they would punch whoever dared to irritate them. The one that was seated at the head of the table was a man who seemed to be in his early 50s. He was currently wearing a military uniform that had a badge that was blue in color. He had short blonde hair and a well-trimmed mustache. His eyes were slightly sunken but were deep and bright. There was a tinge of black below his eyes, though hardly visible, indicating that he had not slept well the previous night. His expression was solemn as he swept his gaze across the table. After a while, he released a deep sigh as he asked, "Give me a report about the current situation." From his voice, one could easily tell that he was fatigued mentally and was someone that needed to get some rest. One of the majors that were present immediately got to his feet and gave a military salute before he spoke. "Colonel, the situation is now so bad. Ever since the attack began, things have been getting out of control recently. It doesn't matter who it is that we send over, the results are the same, that person would be killed off. Not only that, but even though we had tried surrounding that person to use our advantage in numbers, we did nothing but to increase the number of soldiers that we are losing. To make matters worse is that the enemies have joined his side the moment that they came to know that he was attacking us." When he reached this point, there was an expression of anger that was on the major's face. It was obvious that he was simply trying to restrain himself. Otherwise, he would have rushed out of the room to got out and vent by killing a few enemies. He wasn't the only one, as all the others in the room wore the same expressions on their faces. They were not happy about the current situation that they were currently in. They had been at odds with the neighboring country for a long time now. Most of the times, they were the ones that had been suppressing them due to the many advantages that they had. But recently, there was someone that had come over and asked them to hand over a soldier. Furthermore, that person was so impetuous that he killed several soldiers the moment that there was disagreement. If it was a normal situation, they would have already eliminated the other party. But that was something that they really couldn't do at all. It was not just a matter of skills that the other party possessed, but he also had a strange type of armor on him. I think you should take a look at. That armor was able to block even the high-caliber bullets that were used against it. Furthermore, there would not even be a scratch on the armor after the attack. Furthermore, the bullets would be crashed to powder the moment that they came into contact with the armor. To make matters worse was the fact that, to deal with the numerous soldiers that would have gone after him, the only thing that he had to do was to wave his hand and a beam of light would appear and destroy all these soldiers. It was as if he was equipped with high-level attacking and defensive equipment. That was something that had brought terror on the soldiers. And for that reason, they were already contemplating on whether they were supposed to start using the bombs against that person. They had already tried getting to know who it was that the guy wanted. But in the end, they were left speechless after they heard that he didn't even know who it was that he was looking for. What he wanted was for the military to figure out who was the soldier that was involved in the matter concerning a certain prisoner. But no matter how they investigated, they really couldn't find anything that was related to a soldier that saved a prisoner. Although they had done a lot of investigation, they couldn't find anything. From the report, the only surviving police didn't know about the identity of that soldier as that was the first time that she was seeing him. As for their enemies, the moment that they got the information about what was happening over here, they rushed over and decided that they were going to work for that person, to help that person in acquiring what he wanted. And to show their sincerity, they had brought over their soldiers and stationed them at the border of the two countries. Their meaning was simple: they would attack the moment that the Azamian military dared to try to take the soldiers that were stationed at the borders to deal with that person. For that reason, the Azamian military was under a lot of pressure. That person would kill a few soldiers every now and then, saying that this was an indication that he was getting impatient. Due to the losses that they were suffering, the colonel had no choice but to visit the military headquarters to look for a way out of the situation. That was the reason as to why he was asking for the report about the situation. Taking a deep breath, that particular major continued giving reports about what was going on. That person stated that we only have the end of this week to hand over that soldier. Otherwise, he would start by massacring the civilians that are located in the capital city. When he heard that, the colonel couldn't help but get even more angry. Currently, he had already lost many soldiers. That was something that he was furious about. But now, if that person began killing civilians, then that would be something that he couldn't agree to. He was now wondering about what he was supposed to do in the current situation. He couldn't deal with that person with his current strength and skills. Furthermore, there was no way that they were going to launch a bomb in the middle of the city as well. Just as he was deep in thought, Major Alonso spoke. "Colonel, I have a suggestion. What about bringing over the new major? He is a skilled person and I'm pretty sure that he might have a way to deal with that person in one way or the other. And if it is impossible, perhaps he might be able to contain him." The moment that Alonso's voice fell, there was silence in the room. Everyone looked at Alonso with a weird expression on their faces, except for the colonel who was deep in thought. After a moment of silence, one of the majors stood up and spoke. "What nonsense are you saying, Major Alonso? You have to know that this is a serious matter and we definitely cannot joke around with it. You're expecting that we are going to put our trust in a person that became a major due to a favor rather than merits?" He wasn't the only one that thought in such a way. After all, who amongst them hadn't worked off during their youth years to get to the position that they were in? So, they were obviously displeased when suddenly, a person came out of nowhere and became a soldier of the same rank as them. That's right. Although the colonel does have a good impression of that person, that doesn't mean that he can be given the role of handling something like this. This is something that needs experience to handle. Another major, the one that was in charge of the 7th to 10th companies, stated. Alonso looked at him and asked, "Experience, you say? Why is it that an experienced person like you cannot handle the situation when you are claiming that experience is needed? Doesn't that imply that there is no difference between the two of you, not experienced enough to handle the matter? Why you? That major was so stunned that he could only point his fingers at Alonso, not knowing what he was supposed to say in such a situation. "Alonso, it doesn't mean anything for you to say something like that. It is a fact that the other major doesn't have any military experience. Although he was selected by the colonel to become a major, that doesn't change anything about his skills." The major who was in charge of the 2nd company spoke up. Although it was called a company, its size was enough for it to be called a battalion. But, since it was grouped amongst the special companies, then the major had no choice but to be referred to as a major of a company. That's right. It doesn't matter how he is favored by the colonel. But the same fact remains that he is not experienced enough. Although even we are not currently capable of dealing with the problem, at least we can do better than he can. The major who was in charge of the first company spoke up as well. Alonso on the other hand didn't reply. He knew that the matter didn't depend on what these people were saying. It only depended on what the colonel was going to decide. The colonel, who had been seeing his subordinates arguing about, raised his hand to prevent the others who were about to begin speaking. The matter concerning the new major doesn't need any kind of discussion. I made a decision and I hope that every one of you acknowledges it. Otherwise, doesn't that mean that I was stupid by selecting a person who was not capable enough to become a major? The colonel spoke. After his words landed in the ears of the majors, each and every one of them kept quiet. The main reason as to why they were against Jack, even though they had never seen him before, was simply because of their dissatisfaction. Although it was true that they respected the colonel, that didn't mean that they would carry the respect that they had for him and place it on Jack. Additionally, after a long period of time of working hard for them to get promoted, they really couldn't believe the fact that there was a person who had been given a military rank the moment that he joined the army. When he saw that everyone was silent, the colonel shook his head again. He knew that although these people were silent, it was simply because of the respect that they had for his military rank. Since he didn't want any kind of disharmony in the military unit that he led, he decided to clarify things. I know that most of you have several questions about why I gave Jack the rank that is equal to you people. And even though he doesn't have any soldiers under him, he can actually command any soldier that is under any of you to do something as long as it doesn't break the rules. After a moment of silence, the colonel continued, "You should know from my actions for a very long time that I don't favor anyone when it comes to things that concerns military. I do value the lives of all the soldiers that are under me. For that particular reason, there's no way that I am going to hand over the soldiers to any irresponsible leader. And I am sure that you are quite curious about the reason as to why I gave Jack that position." Immediately after saying that, the colonel looked at Alonso and gave him a nod. When he saw that, Alonso couldn't help but feel bitter in his heart. He knew that at this moment, the secret that he had been keeping for about 2 months was going to be revealed. Without wasting time, he stood up and went towards the projection that was used during strategy meetings. After that, he did some connections and managed to play the video that was taken back from Glaze Hotel. This was obviously the video that had been recorded during the assault that had been made on that hotel. Although they were confused, all the majors focused on the screen. And as time passed, they could immediately tell that this was the incident that concerned the loss of 15 lives. Since they were not the ones that were placed in charge of that case, they didn't know much details about that issue. But now, they could see what really happened. In the video, they could see that the people who had taken hostages who were being killed off one after the other by an invisible person. Then, what followed was the fact that all those that had gone to attack the hotel had been cleared off. The hostages had been rescued. At this moment, the eyes of all the majors present apart from Alonso, were widened in surprise. They actually couldn't believe what they were seeing. "Are you sure that this is not a fiction movie?" one of them couldn't help but ask. "That's right. Alonso, where the heck did you get this sci-fi movie from? I don't think I have ever watched it or heard about it." Another one spoke. "I think you should take a look at. But guys, don't you think that this video looks like the one that records had the incidents in the hotel?" Another one who was keen couldn't help but ask. "Now that you mention it, I think that this film was actually produced here in our country. I just wonder what kind of director was needed for such a high-quality movie to be produced." But what that director destroyed in this movie was the fact that the angles that they had used to record are all bad. None of them can give us a clear view of what is really happening. Silence. Upon noticing that the crowd was chattering about, the colonel couldn't help but frown a little. He had never expected that these majors were going to have such a reaction when they saw the video. When silence reigned in the room, the colonel took a deep breath before he continued, "I don't really know where each and every one of you got the thoughts that what you have seen is a movie. What you have just watched right now is the recorded video of the incidents that happened here in our country. Moreover, it happened in the capital city. This is something that we should be ashamed of, considering that we are the ones that are supposed to be keeping the peace of the capital city that is located in the central province. As you can see, an invisible person was taking care of each and every one of those who had attacked. And none of those people had a chance to use the guns that they had, even though there was a situation where there were more than one of them. The one who is behind the actions is someone that you have all been asking about. The person who had taken care of that incident is Jack, the new major. Since all of you have been questioning about his capabilities, I believe that you have seen them. And I can believe that none of you can actually match the level of his skills. And although it is true that he was not part of the military, And he might really lack the experience of being in the military. That doesn't diminish the skills that he possesses. As for why he is invisible in that clip, that is simply because of the team that he possesses. There are actually several skilled people that can be considered the epitome of IT. None of those on our part who attempted to see how the video was edited managed to find anything. These two are already enough reasons as to why I had decided to discuss with my superior to grant Jack that position. Of course, there are other reasons, but I cannot talk about them at the moment. So, just like Alonso had said, I do believe that perhaps this person might actually have a chance to deal with the current problem that we are facing. There was a long moment of silence as the majors began digesting the information that they had received. This was something completely unbelievable to them. A person who was that skilled. Even the special forces that were present in the first and second companies couldn't actually do something like that. Although they wanted to be doubtful about what the colonel had said, considering the current situation that they were in, they didn't believe that the colonel would feed them with false information. Ahem. Colonel, although I can understand that he was given the position due to the fact that he has capabilities, but why is it that during such a period of time, when we are facing a catastrophe, he is not actually present? The major who was in charge of the first company questioned. That is a matter considering the agreement that we had with him. He is not just a person with skills. Otherwise, why do you think that there are other reasons that I gave him the position of a major? The colonel replied. Although there were several questions running rampant inside the minds of these majors, they didn't ask as they waited for the colonel to continue. The colonel looked at Alonso and gave him a nod. Contact him and see if he can come over. Make sure that it is done as soon as possible. Yes, Colonel. Alonso nodded deeply before he left the room hurriedly. He knew the importance of the matter and wasn't ready to delay it even for a moment. He knew that the relationship between Jack and Valnaro was quite close. Even though it was only official, at least, Valnaro and Jack had communicated for a long period of time as compared to him. So, the moment that he got out of the conference room, he immediately contacted Valnaro and informed him that he had to contact Jack and inform him that he was needed at the headquarters of the central province.